garden within our big garden. So this area garden is the tea garden, or roji. And so this is essentially like a beautiful outdoor waiting area for the tea house over there, which is closed because we have all the light stuff in there. But so before a guest would be called in to tea, this is kind of gets you mentally and physically ready. So you would kind of be waiting out there where the bench is, and when it's time to come inside, you follow that windy, uneven stone path. And it's windy and uneven because that forces you to watch your step. Because when you're watching your step, you are then fully present in the moment, not thinking about something. He wasn't watching the step. You gotta
He's more present in the moment now.
Exactly. He has been reminded to be mindful. So there you go. You're forced to be present, and then you come to where those people are staying. That round basin is called a tsukubai. And that there is, usually be a bamboo ladle laying across two stones in front of it. So you would take a scoop of the water, you would rinse your hands and also rinse out your mouth. So you become present, you become cleansed, and then you would enter in the tea house door from the outside. And it's hard to see because it's shut, but the tea house door is small enough that it forces you to duck to go in, which makes you bow. So you are
We cannot go
humbled.
inside?
No, unfortunately it's closed now at night, but I can talk about it from the outside. So the door, that tea house though, is based off of, so it's not, a typical tea house that you would find. There is a more typical tea house actually in the Philadelphia Art Museum that has the regular door, which is actually half the size of that door. So you have to get really humble to go inside. But that has a nobleman's entrance, because that tea house is based on the kind that would be on a wealthy person's private property. So noblemen, they still have to get humble, but not quite as humble as normal people going to a normal tea house. So lots of status things. But one thing that
so
isn't
the
there,
tea is something big for them to have a house specifically for
tea ceremonies.
Tea ceremony.
Yeah. If you want a normal cup of tea, then like your servants make it for you and give it to you wherever you want it. But the tea ceremony is special. So that is kind of it's not really a ceremony like a religious ceremony, although it does have some origins in like Buddhist philosophy.
Okay.
But it's kind of half performance art, half hospitality act. So every move that you make, everything from the way you whisk your tea to the way you wipe the bowl with a napkin is choreographed. So it's something that you can learn, like a dance or an instrument. And so it becomes this is where the Buddhist philosophy comes in. So it becomes part of your muscle memory, so then you can be fully present in the moment with your guests. It's a meditative act. But so hospitality, because normally if you're a wealthy person hosting a tea ceremony, you could get your servants to make the tea for you, but by making it in front of your guests in a beautiful way, you are both humbling yourself by doing that and showing respect to your guests, and then also, because it's beautiful, you're putting on a show. So it's all of those things wrapped into one. And tea ceremony is just the English phrase for it, but in Japanese it's called chanoyu, which just means hot water for tea. I think it was named tea ceremony by a Jesuit monk who saw it and was reminded of Catholic rituals with the Eucharist and everything. So he's like, oh, this is like a ceremony, but it's just kind of a cool choreographed tea party.
So it is religious. It has the religious part of it, and it has the hospitality, and it teach respect.
Exactly. So it has just a lot of aspects to it.
For just drinking tea.
Oh yeah.
Yeah.
There's like so many different kinds of tea ceremonies, because it's like having a repertoire of plays that so there are different kinds of tea ceremonies for different kinds of year. There's different levels of formality. So, the basic thing is like thin tea, which is just, more water than matcha powder, which is the powdered green tea.
Okay.
And you'd whisk it up, and then you have tea with a sweet, and that's like the basic version of it, because you don't sweeten your tea, you eat a candy or something sweet before you take a sip, and then the sugar is left in your mouth, and then that sweetens the tea. But thick tea is way more formal, and that is like more tea powder than water, so it's like a paste It's
it's
harder
like,
to drink, but very fancy. And then there's also versions that come with like an 11-course meal. So it's like you can have it with more food or just dessert. There's a million different versions of it. It actually takes at least 10 years to become a tea master. And even though there are tea schools all around the world, like the Urasenke Tea School, which is kind of the most liberal of the 3 main tea schools that are operating, and they have the biggest international following. They operate out of here on Saturday mornings. They'll teach tea classes here, and we also have public tea ceremonies once a month. The next one is on the 15th, and that's really cool. And they do kind of the more general, less fancy tea ceremony, but then there's also the Omoto Senke, who are like the most formal, fancy tea people, and they will come here twice a year. And they will do thin tea, but they will also do thick tea in the tea house, very formal, and maximum 4 guests because the tea house is tiny.
It's very tiny, yeah.
It's already sold out.
I don't know when the next Omoto Senke is, but you can look online. It's on our events calendar.
Are you okay to be? Hi. Are you okay to be in the video?
Sure. I'm on the group now.
Cool. But yeah, so there's so many tea things. I can keep talking about tea for like an hour.
Okay, I just have a question. So they maybe this is something I don't know. So it's the tea is something big in Japan in general.
Yeah. I mean, tea is like a popular drink to
like
drink.
Alcohol. Like, you know how you work? Okay.
Funny story is it can kind of be like alcohol. Back when tea was introduced to Japan after monks brought it on a trip from China. It was used in the temples as a meditation aid because a big problem with Zen Buddhist monks is, you do hard labor in the mornings and then spend your afternoons sitting in a dark room, meditating, thinking about nothing. So people would fall asleep all the time. So the big thing to use tea for would be to stay awake while you're meditating. It was used as an aid for that. But eventually the merchant class got their hands on it and started selling it to rich people. And so like 15th century or so, tea culture became like wine culture is. So people would have tea tasting parties, like wine tastings, where they would...
That's how you were talking about tea. It's like you're talking
very
about
wine.
Alcohol and wine.
Yeah, so people would gamble on where exactly they think the tea was grown based on just, arbitrary things about the flavor. So, you take a sip and you're like... this tastes like, grass and cumulus clouds. So therefore, this was grown on such and such mountain on the east side of the road, completely. And tea culture became like more and more bloated and like pretentious. And so tea ceremony as a thing was invented by a man named Senno Rikyu. And he was a man who became like a very high-ranking monk, and he was the one who's kind of said, we have gotten so far away from our roots with tea. This has gotten ridiculous and very, show-offy and completely against, all the principles that we should be
So it had a
holding to.
farm-to-table moment?
Yeah, no, like I like to call him like the OG tea hipster because, he was the one. So we were drinking tea out of like solid gold tea bowls and using ivory tea scoops. And he's the one that said, no, from now on we're going to use bamboo tea tools because bamboo is a weed and anybody can get their hands on it. So now tea becomes accessible to everybody by using a tool that anyone can make, and the value from it comes not from the material it's made from, but from the effort used to make it and the sentimental value it gains as you pass it down from generation to generation.
Accessible.
Exactly.
Like, everybody can have tea.
It was still a thing that rich people did,
tea,
but now it's like you can feel better about yourself
That
when you
is
do
so
it.
cool.
Yeah. And then like no more solid gold tea bowls. Now tea bowls are like earthen, made by local artisans and passed down in sentimental value only kind of thing.
Yeah, I thought India was big on tea in general, but maybe this is my modern thinking because they are
Even
the big
more.
export.
I mean, tea came from India originally.
Tea came from India.
Yeah.
Okay, you look like you are the historian girl
So
here,
much
so
tea.
you know everything. So when it was introduced by the monks to Japan, when? Around what time?
So
1500?
the year that tea was brought over by the Japanese monks who visited China was 1192.
You mean doing the opposite by the monks
So the
from
Japanese
China.
monks did a trip to China where they were checking on their Chan Buddhist brothers. Chan Buddhism and Zen Buddhism are the same thing. They're just called different names in China and Japan. And so they wanted to see what their brothers were up to. And they were so like surprised by the dedications of these monks that didn't fall asleep that they asked what their secret was.
What's the secret?
The secret was the miracle of caffeine. So they actually, and the trip was like very
tea
well
is
documented.
high.
Yeah.
Tea is very high in caffeine than coffee.
Yeah. Matcha, the green tea that's used, the powdered green